Approximately 7 years ago, I came to Los Angeles to interview at the Ziegler School for Rabbinic Studies. And the interview, which took place over the course of 2 or 3 days, started with turning up on the Ziegler campus at 7 o'clock on a fairly cold California morning, which disappointed me, and going to the Ziegler Bet Midrash to take part in the morning minyan. You have to understand that in England as yet, although there are Reform woman rabbis, there are no practicing conservative woman rabbis with congregations, although there are 2 or 3 more in the community now than there were then. And I walked into the Bet Midrash, and in what I think of as downstage left, in the bottom left-hand corner, I saw a huge head of tumbling blonde curly hair and a crimson and gold and white talit and a woman praying. And I thought, so it can be done. And over the course of my time at Ziegler, that woman, it will not surprise you to know, was then Elianna Yolkut, now Rabbi Elianna Yolkut. I always thought of her as the woman who proves that it can be done. I came to know her as a fierce scholar of Torah, as a passionate Jewish advocate, and as one of the most kind-hearted people I know. In a twist that I did not expect, it also turned out that she was my predecessor on this bima, and it gives me real pleasure to welcome her as our Darshanit this morning, Rabbi Elianna Yolkut.
See, Ellen, that's why I couldn't straighten my hair. Ellen asked me why I didn't straighten my hair. She didn't know that that was going to be the introduction, but I did, so I had to. Yeah, I know. I hear the rumor is there's a problem hearing the darshan or darshanit, so I've never not been heard before my whole life, so it's hard for me to imagine. Shabbat Shalom. It's wonderful to be back. I'm staying this Shabbat with my dear friends, Stephanie and Steve Klasky Gamer, and their wonderful children, and they have a beautiful custom at their Shabbat table of sharing a special moment from your week after we recite the Kiddush. And I was sharing last night that my beautiful moment this week is the ability to live and have 2 homes, to come here and feel at home, and to know that I have a home back in my home now in New York. But don't worry, I'm still a Cardinals fan. Just a couple of brief thank yous before I begin my words. The first to Rabbi Silver and Rabbi Bernhard in absentia. I hope you'll make sure he knows. Just to be able to share your bima with someone is a gift of egolessness. The bima is a special place. It belongs to the Klei Kodesh, to the clergy of a community, and to share and open your bima so openly, really wonderful. And to hear the cantors sing again, both of them is a gift for me, and it's great to daven together again. But the biggest thanks goes to the Harrises. I won't say a lot because I'll get teary-eyed, and I'm trying not to get teary-eyed. I'll just say that if you were to look up the word mensch in the dictionary, their family's picture would be there, all 5 of them. So I'm honored that you wanted to share your simcha with me. I hope to share many smachot together in the future, many joyous occasions in the future, mostly celebrating my sports team's victories. Today's Parsha, Parshat Vayeshev, the Torah portion we read this morning, though we didn't read these portions so much, are filled with the tales of the biblical character Joseph, and cannot be read without considering its placement in the larger Jewish calendar. Each year, Vayeshev falls either during or just before the holiday of Hanukkah. So it would be a lost opportunity, given that Hanukkah is approaching beginning Tuesday night, not to ask the question, how do they relate to one another? What is the connection between Yosef HaTzadik, and his stories and the Hanukkah story? How are we doing on sound? Good, okay. There likely isn't one answer to this question of connections, but many. You could say, for instance, both are stories of how the Jewish community deals with and addresses outside influences. In the case of Joseph, the Egyptians and their enslavement, and in the case of Hanukkah, the Assyrian Greeks. Questions about assimilation and acculturation still stand to this very day at the heart of the Jewish community's struggle with being part of and separate from the larger society. But this morning, I want to offer a different and more subtle suggestion about what might be the relationship between these two stories. And I want to share these words dedicated to our bar mitzvah this morning and the beginning of his journey into young adulthood. Because this connection may be one of the most important and valuable messages Judaism has to teach us. I want to posit this connection as a fundamental definition of what it means to be a Jewish person of faith. We begin with a question by one of my teachers, Rabbi Ed Feinstein, who is preaching just down the road this morning, who asked once, who is the hero of the Hanukkah story? He taught there was a hidden hero in this tale. Perhaps you know the story well. The temple in Jerusalem is destroyed, decimated by the Greek king Antiochus IV's army. Though not burned to the ground, it was for all intents and purposes ruined and useless for purpose. In the course of the cleanup, our ancestors were told by the rabbis, found a cruse of oil, enough for one day, and instead it lasts for 8 days. Rabbi Feinstein posits that the hero of the story are not the Maccabees, not the armies fighting out in battle, but the hero was whichever priest hid that cruse of oil. Whichever priest believed amidst the destruction and devastation of war that one day the Jewish people would come back, they would retake the temple, and they would need to light the menorah once again. The one who hid that oil is the secret hero of Hanukkah. Maybe he didn't fight the battle, but he hid the oil. And in that singular act contains within it one of the most powerful elements of what it means to live a deep and powerful Jewish life. Let us then draw a parallel with the story of Yosef. There is a striking incident in this morning's Torah reading. When Joseph was a young man, living as a slave in the house of Potiphar, a powerful Egyptian businessman, he comes up against Potiphar's wife, who tries to seduce him. The Torah tells us of Joseph's almost ambiguous response, Vayima'en, and he refused, chanted with a very rare cantillation mark appearing only 4 times in the entire Torah, the shalshelet, which notes go up and down the scale 3 times. Our tradition teaches that this note is there because Joseph hesitated a little bit. Who wouldn't have? He didn't just say no, he said, well, no. Imagine, it was a hard situation. Potiphar's wife, sophisticated, married to a wealthy man, we're told by the rabbis very beautiful and certainly very powerful, and Joseph, a slave in their home. It was not only seduction, it was a power imbalance between this woman and this slave. But he managed to say no, but not without a moment's thought. Not only does he hesitate, but the Torah continues with the word vayanos, and he fled. He doesn't just walk away, he runs away. Because when you want something, or are tempted to want something, you don't just walk away, you run far, far away as fast as you can. Sound familiar? Tempted by the fruit of a tree you shouldn't partake of? And that word does not only appear vayanos here, but it appears 4 times. 4 times Joseph flees in the stories that were told in the book of Genesis. But that word doesn't only appear here. It also will begin to appear very briefly when we begin to recite the Hallel, the Psalms of Praise, this coming week for Hanukkah, when we add into our daily prayers these special Psalms of Praise. In Psalm 114, we read, Hayam, Ram, Vayanos. The sea saw and fled. It refers to the splitting of the sea at the end of the Exodus. So, of course, our tradition asks, what's the connection between these 2 words? Vayanos in the Psalms and Vayanos in Joseph's story. What's the connection between Joseph's running away and the sea running away? And there is a connection. Because remember, while all the people Israel were going around at the end of the enslavement, just before the Exodus, collecting some of the Egyptian wealth, well owed them after years and years of slavery, there was one Jew who wasn't going around collecting wealth. Anyone know who that was? Yes, Moshe. Anyone know what he was doing? Shout it out if you know. He was getting Joseph's bones. Moses was going to collect Joseph's coffin because Joseph made his descendants promise that they would not bury him in Egypt and that when they returned to the land of Israel, they would bring him back there. So Moshe goes out while the rest of the people are collecting wealth, and he collects the coffin of Yosef. And the people carry it with them as they begin their exodus and approach the sea. Now, according to the tradition, in this moment of peril, what made the sea part? Most of us would probably tell the story of Nachshon, the man who walks into the sea until it's all the way up until his neck, and only in that moment of faith does the sea part. But there's another tradition of what causes the sea to part, another midrash, another rabbinic tale. And that is that the sea parts when the sea sees Yosef's coffin, Joseph's bones at the edge of the seashore. Why? Because Yosef is not known as just Yosef in our tradition, as Rabbi Silver mentioned in her charge to Isaac, but as Yosef HaTzadik, Joseph the righteous one, in part because of the story I told before and what happened with Potiphar's wife. So because Joseph Vayanos, because Joseph ran away from the advances of Potiphar's wife, the sea does the same when it sees the coffin of his bones, Vayanos, and the sea splits. So what's the connection between these 2 stories? Hanukkah and Joseph. When you do a mitzvah, in this case we'll mistranslate it as a good deed, you never know what the ultimate consequence of that good deed is going to be. The priest who hides the cruse of oil had no idea that he was starting Hanukkah. He had no idea that thousands of years later, Jews all over the world would be lighting Chanukiot for 8 days in celebration of his singular, simple act. When Joseph flees as a young man from Potiphar's wife, he has no idea that hundreds of years later, he would cause the sea to split and the Israelites to walk to freedom. The poet Wordsworth writes, "The best portion of a good man's life is his little, nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and love." When we do something that is good, it may not have the effect we want, but it might have an impact that we never imagined. Isn't that what a mitzvah really is? It's a worldly enactment of faith, or in the words of Rabbi David Wolpe, faith embodied. When you do a mitzvah, you do it with the assumption that ultimately it will do good, even if it doesn't do good in the way you thought it would. You have no idea, like the ripple effect of jumping into a pool, what will come as a result of your deeds. you can hide a cruse of oil and create a holiday lasting generations for an entire people. Or you can run away in fidelity to God and lead an entire people to freedom. This is, in a certain sense, the essential definition of what it means to grow into a Jewish adult. We Jews, we don't take a leap of faith, we take a leap of action. We recognize that we don't ultimately understand what this mitzvah will do, but we do it anyway because we believe it will have consequences. And you may not know what those consequences will be. You may not even live to see those consequences, but you still act because in the world it will take effect. You put your Chanukiah in the window on Tuesday night for 8 nights, even though you don't know if anybody is going to pass by and see it, because you believe the light will make a difference. You give tzedakah, but don't know who will receive it, but give it anyway because you believe it will make a difference. You come here on Shabbat morning and pray, and don't know ultimately if anybody is listening, but you daven anyway because you believe it will make a difference. That is the connection between Yosef and Hanukkah. We read the story at the darkest time of the year, and we recall Yosef in prison, and we read about the temple when it was destroyed and disfigured, but we know the prison that he was in will lead to a freedom for an entire people, and that the temple's destruction will eventually lead to light. So this is a good time to choose a mitzvah whose consequences you can't foresee, but whose enactments you believe in, and spread some light in the world. And know that ultimately, your light will spread beyond your tiny mitzvah and penetrate the darkness in the world. In the tradition of that unnamed Kohen, who we have no idea who he was, and of Yosef HaTzadik, Joseph the righteous one, you are doing mitzvot out of faith that your act of goodness will become something to be thankful for and to be thanked for. And that act, that singular goodness, will rise before the Kisei HaKavod, before God's throne, as a light in someone's dark world. We are asked to be a people of faith in the darkest hours, where faith is about the actions we choose to take in the bleakest of situations whose future is unknown. In the uncertainty of life and in the uncertainty of the world around us, Judaism asks you, you're responsible for this now, it demands of you to find the courage to act through mitzvot as acts of goodness and beacons of hope. For just like Joseph and that priest, we simply never know what sparks of light we will bring to the world around us. And so I pray, may we all have the courage to live in the brightness of their righteousness and be inheritors of the tradition that they gave us. Shabbat Shalom.